The Yoon administration has pitched the smallest spending increase in nearly 2 decades for next year's budget, as it doubles down on fiscal soundness compared to a previous expansionary stance. Despite the belt tightening, South Korea's financing for ODA projects has hit a fresh high, and that for helping Ukraine has increased eightfold. Military spending is also going up to bolster the Korean three-axis defense system, among others. Meanwhile, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is railing against the leaders of South Korea, the US, and Japan taking aim at the three nations' joint drills. It's August 29, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Min. We begin this evening with the budget proposed by the Yoon administration for next year. The government has kept the spending increase at the lowest level in almost 2 decades. This as the nation continues to tighten its belt and shifts away from previous expansionary stance, while promising to spend more for marginalized people. Our business correspondent Shin Ha-young joins me in the studio. Welcome, Ha-young.
Good evening, Jong-min.
So, Ha-young, the government's budget proposal for 2024, what were the major shifts and takeaways?
Well, Jong-min, for this year's budget, Yoon administration focused on building a solid foundation for physical soundness. And while continuing with this theme for next year's budget as well, it has also focused on improving the country's financial structure. Let's take a listen.
우리 정부는 경제 체질을 시장 중심 민간 주도로 바꿔 민간이 더 활발하게 투자하고 지출하고 일자리를 만들어내는데 역점을 둘 것입니다. 이를 위해 민간 투자를 저해하는 킬러 규제를 과감하게 철폐하고 민간의 자금이 흘러갈 수 있도록 금융 시스템을 정비할 것입니다.
In order to do so, South Korea will continue to tighten its belt. The government on Tuesday proposed a budget bill for next year of 656.9 trillion Korean won, or around $495 billion at the current rate. And it's an increase of 2.8% from this year's budget, the smallest on-year increase since top-down budgeting was first introduced in 2005. And also, the government has gone through major spending reforms in order to secure an extra $17 billion of funds for use in the budget. Seoul's finance ministry said the newly secured funds will be used to stabilize people's livelihoods and for public safety.
No matter how difficult the financial conditions may be, investing in areas such as protecting the socially vulnerable, ensuring public safety, and preparing for a better future cannot be neglected.
Then, Ha-young, what does the government have in mind as key priorities for next year's budget?
Well, Jong-min, the centerpiece of the bill is some $14.6 billion allocated to bolster the welfare system for the socially vulnerable. This includes increasing the maximum basic living allowance for low-income families to approximately $1,400 per month. And that's $160 more compared to this year and more than the total increase implemented by the previous administration. And as a response to the aging society issue, the government has increased the number of jobs for senior citizens to 1 million, which is approximately 10% of their elderly population, and marks a record high increase of 147,000. And it has also increased senior employment allowance by 7%. Those allowances has been frozen since 2018. And the budget bill will also be used to provide counseling and training to motivate and encourage the so-called NEET tribe in South Korea. NEET is an acronym for not currently engaged in education, employment, or training. And it is also planning to introduce a transportation card called K-Pass in July next year, which will reduce the burden of transit expenses for young people by 30% or more than $245 per year. And the Yoon administration will also spend some of the budget on dealing with the country's low birth rate. Under the 2024 budget, parents with newborns will be eligible for up to 1 million won, or around $750 per month in parental allowance beginning next year. And also to achieve a balance between work and childcare, the period of paid childcare leave, in this case for both maternity and paternity leave, will be extended for the first time since 1995 from 12 months to 18 months.
And are there any new changes that Korean business and industry should pay attention to? And also, what's in store for next year's tax revenue?
Well, financial support for AI, biotech, and cybersecurity, and as well as South Korea's digital platform government, which connects data across the private and public sectors, will be expanded from the current $2.7 billion to $3.3 billion to help advance the service industry. And also, in terms of cultural content exports and securing intellectual property rights, the government will be investing more than twice as much compared to this year. Take a listen.
Amid the heating up of OTT platform competition around the world, to promote cultural content exports and secure intellectual property rights, we'll expand policy financing from 800 billion won to 1.8 trillion won, more than double, by establishing a new K-Content Strategic Fund.
Meanwhile, the budget has been designed to manage the increase in government debt by reducing expenditure growth.
Despite a decline in tax revenue, we mitigated the deterioration of the fiscal balance for the upcoming year by curbing the growth rate of total expenditure. We have also managed to control the increase in national debt, keeping it at its lowest level since 2019 at 61.8 trillion won, as part of efforts to establish a solid foundation for fiscal soundness.
And following a decline in national tax revenue, the figure for next year is projected to be roughly $278 billion, down 8% from this year. And the amount in tax exemption is expected to be increased by $5.7 billion from this year to a record high of $58 billion. And so falling tax revenue and rising tax exemptions have resulted in a tax exemption rate of 16.3%, which exceeds the legal limit by 2.3 percentage points. And that's the largest difference ever. And with next year's budget, South Korea's budget deficit to GDP ratio is forecast to be at 1.9%, worsening by 1.3 percentage points from this year. The total national debt to GDP ratio is expected to be 51% next year, up 0.6 percentage points from this year. And the government now plans to submit the final bill to the National Assembly on September 1st, and the legal deadline for National Assembly to pass the budget is December 2nd.
Right. Thanks for your reporting, Hayoung.
Always my pleasure.
And despite the belt tightening, the South Korea has set aside a record high amount for official development assistance in line with its global pivotal state policy. Military spending is also set to go up to counter North Korea's nuclear and missile aggression. For more, here is our foreign affairs correspondent, Bae Eun-ji.
South Korea has tentatively allocated its largest ever budget for official development assistance, or government aid designed to promote the economic development and welfare of other countries. Stressing the country's growing role in the global community, President Yoon said Tuesday that the government plans to raise the ODA budget next year to 6.5 trillion Korean won, or roughly $4.9 billion.
글로벌 중추국가로서 국제사회에 대한 책임 있는 역할과 기여도 확대해야 합니다. 우크라이나 재건 지원 ODA 예산을 5배 이상 확대하고 디지털 분야 ODA를 대폭 늘리겠습니다.
Of the total ODA budget, nearly $400 million will be used to support Ukraine, which is 8 times higher than last year. It will spend $196 million to provide medical supplies, humanitarian aid, and around $98 million for reconstruction projects. And another $98 million will be given to help Ukraine through international agencies. As for next year's defense budget, the country has announced a plan to increase it by 4.5%, focusing on strengthening its capabilities to counter North Korea's nuclear missile threats. The Defense Ministry said Tuesday that it'll submit a budget proposal of about $45 billion to the National Assembly on Friday for approval. It seeks to spend around $13.5 billion to bolster defense capabilities, 5.2% higher compared to the year before. This includes building a combined combat system using both manned and unmanned assets, as well as developing the country's so-called three-axis defense system, a scheme to counter North Korea's nuclear missile threats. The first axis is to preemptively strike North Korea's nuclear missile sites when there are signs of an imminent attack targeting South Korea. If that fails, it moves on to the second axis, intercepting launched missiles using a multi-layered missile defense system. And finally, the third axis, mass retaliation against North Korea following an attack on the South. The ministry also set aside $31 billion to run its military forces, an increase of 5.8% on year. Meanwhile, the government decided to cut next year's budget for the Unification Ministry by more than 20%. Hyun, Arirang News.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is railing against the leaders of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan, prompting criticism from the Seoul government. What's also unusual is Kim calling the South by its official name, something taken as a show of hostility. Or Lee Dae-hyun explains.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un criticized the leaders of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan for their plans for trilateral joint military drills. According to the regime state-run media on Tuesday, Kim Jong-un marked the Day of Navy by inspecting the naval headquarters near Pyongyang with his daughter. Now, this was the first time that Kim Jong-un has visited the naval headquarters for the Day of Navy since he took power in 2012. In a ceremonial speech there, Kim mentioned the Camp David Trilateral Summit, where Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo pledged to regularize joint military exercises. He also called the Korean Peninsula the, quote, most dangerous zone for nuclear war, citing Washington's deployment of strategic assets in the South. During the speech, Kim referred to South Korea by using the country's full name, the Republic of Korea, for the first time. Kim Yo-jong, the sister of Kim Jong-un, used the full name earlier last month. One expert says this shows the North's stronger stance towards South Korea.
This shows how the North will now consider the South as external relations, not as one people. No flexibility will be applied in Seoul-Pyongyang relations anymore, which is a hard line on Seoul.
One official from South Korea's Unification Ministry assessed this as Pyongyang expressing its sense of crisis amid strengthened security ties between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. The official also said that the North must know that its missile provocations are the cause of the stronger ties, adding that Pyongyang should focus on its public welfare instead of preparing for war. In fact, in international waters south of the Korean Peninsula on Tuesday, South Korea, the U.S., and Japan staged a trilateral missile defense exercise. The Navy said that the exercise focused on mastering the response procedures, which is to detect and track a computer-simulated target and share related information. An inspection of sharing missile warning data in real time between the three nations was also conducted. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
At the United Nations, South Korea, the U.S. and Japan have reiterated their rebuke of North Korea's most recent satellite attempt, denouncing the regime's violation of multiple Security Council resolutions. Lee Seung-jae has more.
During a meeting of the United Nations Open-Ended Working Group for Space Security held at the UN office in Geneva on Monday, a number of countries, including South Korea, the US, and Japan, condemned North Korea's recent attempt at launching a military reconnaissance satellite. Speaking at the meeting, Park Eun-jin, South Korea's Director of Disarmament and Non-Proliferation at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, said that attempts made by the North to send a military spy satellite using ballistic missile technology are illegal, stressing that Pyongyang is getting closer to achieving its goal of advancing the necessary technology. Japan's representative also slammed the recent launch, saying that it goes against UN Security Council resolutions and poses a serious threat to countries in the region. However, North Korea's permanent representative to the United Nations Secretariat in Geneva, Han Dae-sung, argued that UN Security Council resolutions are illegal documents that violate the UN Charter and that Pyongyang will not be bound by such resolutions led by the United States and its allies. Han continued to argue that other countries have also launched satellites, with South Korea and the U.S. constantly conducting joint military drills. Such launches are self-defense measures directly related to guaranteeing the safety of the country. The U.S. quickly responded by saying that while the joint drills are defensive in nature, the North's ballistic missile launches are not. The UN Open-Ended Working Group for Space Security is a working-level consultative body established by the UN General Assembly to create responsible norms of conduct, and comes after North Korea conducted its second attempt to send a military spy satellite into orbit, which failed last Thursday. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Special forces from South Korea and the United States have been out in the ocean for the past couple of days to master techniques for maritime infiltration. It's among the dozens of field training as part of the ongoing Ulji Freedom Shield exercise. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung takes us there.
Special operations forces from South Korea and the U.S. head toward the shore on rubber boats, keeping their positions low. A number of the Special Forces personnel swim the rest of the way, cautiously making sure it's safe for the rest of the team to arrive. This is a glimpse of the combined training that Seoul and Washington do on a daily basis to infiltrate the enemy's base. Since last week in Yangyang County, Gangwon-do Province, around 100 personnel from South Korea's Army and U.S. Special Operations Command Korea have been conducting field training exercises to enhance skills in maritime infiltration. The training is part of the Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise, which runs until Thursday. This combined special operation is aimed at strengthening Seoul and Washington's interoperability.
Combined special operations capabilities could be further strengthened by mastering various tasks with the U.S. Special Operations Command Korea. We will continue to train and establish a perfect readiness so that we can accomplish any mission in case of emergency.
Seoul and Washington Special Forces master maritime infiltration techniques, including special strike operations and close combat techniques. The U.S. Captain Jay said the training is also focused on building the skills of leaders at every level, noting it as being the most important resource. He also underlined strong teamwork with South Korean forces.
For 70 years, American and Korean soldiers have stood shoulder to shoulder, dedicated to the defense of our homelands. Our ironclad alliance is integrated at every level, from the strategic to the tactical. I am proud to work with my Korean brothers. 같이 갑시다, 필승.
Going forward, Seoul and Washington Special Forces vow to prepare for every scenario on air, land, and sea.
U.S. Korea! We are together!
Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol declared 3 additional regions as special disaster zones on Tuesday in an effort to swiftly recover from the aftermath of Typhoon Khanun. Goseong-gun County of Gangwon-do Province, part of Gyeongju City, and Chilguk-gun County in Gyeongsang-buk-do Province are now eligible for the government's financial support for recovery work, as well as relief funds for victims and other benefits. 2 other regions, Daegu's Gunwi-gun County and a different part of Goseong-gun County, were named as special disaster zones 2 weeks ago. With this new announcement, all of Goseong-gun County is a special disaster zone. The top office says the decision was based on a detailed joint investigation by relevant ministries regarding the typhoon damage. Earlier today, the ruling People Power Party and the main opposition Democratic Party ended their respective 2-day workshops, making resolutions that will hopefully lead them towards accomplishments in the upcoming regular National Assembly sessions, as well as setting themselves up for next year's general election. Our political correspondent Lee Shi-hoo reports.
Rival lawmakers of the ruling People Power Party and the main opposition Democratic Party each adopted and publicized new sets of resolutions on Tuesday at the closing of their respective 2-day workshops. The PPP representatives who met in the city of Incheon vowed to take 3 specific actions. They are confronting political provocations while refraining from political strife and prioritizing the livelihood of the public, committing to engage in productive legislative action to foster the country's economic growth, and working together with the government to push for reform in the pension, labor, and education sectors and successfully carrying out national tasks. PPP leader Kim Ki-yeon urged his members to move forward with strong determination, saying that the party was at the starting line of a journey toward victory. The DP gathering in the city of Wonju in Gangwon-do Province also made public its resolution containing 8 promises to the people to improve their livelihoods. They included the DP's determination to keep on protesting against the Fukushima wastewater release, protect the general public against violent crimes, and demand thorough investigations of the Jamboree fiasco and the Osong underwater tunnel disaster, as well as to improve the economy. The DP leader Lee Jae-myung said it was necessary to come up with measures for the recovery of people's livelihood while demanding thorough investigations of the Jamboree and tunnel disaster. The workshops come just ahead of the last regular session of the 21st National Assembly prior to next year's general election. The 100-day assembly session is set to begin on September 1st. And this will be some members of the rival party's last chance to push for and pass long-awaited pending bills. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
South Korea's export value index fell year-on-year for the 10th consecutive month in July due to a drop in semiconductor prices. Data released by the Bank of Korea on Tuesday showed the index decreased by 15.8% compared to last year, with more than a 30% drop in semiconductor prices. However, the net terms of trade index has been recovering since June due to a bigger decline in import costs than export prices. Specifically, this was caused by larger base effects from international oil prices in the first half of 2023 compared to a year ago. South Korea will raise the spending limit on holiday gifts for public officials in a bid to boost the domestic economy and business for local producers. Anti-Corruption Commissioner Kim Hong-il says the revision to the country's graft law will take effect from Wednesday, with spending on agricultural and fishery products to rise from 100,000 won to 150,000 won, or roughly 75 to 110 US dollars. The range of gifts for civil servants up to 50,000 won will expand to include gift certificates for food or cultural products and services, with the exception of vouchers that can be converted into cash. Ahead of the Chuseok Thanksgiving holiday, the limit for agricultural and fishery items will be raised from 200,000 won to 300,000 on agricultural and fishery products, or roughly $150 to $225. The special spending limit will apply from September 5th to October 4th. HYBE, the agency behind BTS, announced on Monday at a press conference in Los Angeles the final 20 contestants who will compete in a global girl group audition program. Called the Debut Dream Academy, the audition program is led by HYBE's chairman Bang Si-hyuk in partnership with major U.S. record label Geffen Records, with the aim of forming an international girl group based on K-pop methodology. Chosen out of 120,000 participants, the finalists from 12 countries have been training for over a year in the U.S., and their audition process for the next 12 weeks will be shared on YouTube and other platforms starting September 1st.
A low-pressure system moving across the country will bring showers until tomorrow. If you take a look at the radar, the red region indicates relatively stronger rain clouds. Heavy rain is currently pounding central regions and parts of the south coast. By tomorrow morning, heavier showers will be concentrated across the south of the country. As for the overall amount of rainfall, the coastlines of Gyeongsang-namdo province will see severe downpours of up to 200 millimeters. For Jeollanam-do and the remainder of Gyeongsang-do province will see up to 150 millimeters. Central regions, including the Seoul-metropolitan area, will see 30 to 80 millimeters. Gusty winds will also sweep across the coastlines. For all coastal regions surrounding the peninsula, winds will be gusting as fast as 15 meters per second. High waves are also expected, so please stay away from breakwaters or piers. Wet morning will prevail nationwide. Seoul will start off at 22 degrees Celsius tomorrow. Daytime highs in Seoul get up to 26, Daejeon 25, Gyeongju and Busan will be topping out at 30 degrees. And southern regions will see frequent showers for the remainder of the week. On Sunday, another round of nationwide rain is in the forecast. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.